Hey, it's Carl with a K. Let's talk about Hollywood. Welcome to the show. Hi everybody, this is Carl Gibson, and welcome to episode 37 of Let's Talk About Hollywood, my podcast audio memoir about my career in Hollywood, stories, takeaways, characters, situations, things that we can all relate to, because as I always say, Hollywood is a psychology just as much as it is a place. And it is a place, but it's a psychology for sure. It's a mindset, and it's different depending on what your dream is. Now, you don't have to be in Hollywood to be creative, to be a storyteller, to work in crafts, to have any specialty that has to do with storytelling in any form. So this is about how I did it. I'm just one story, but there's characters, takeaways, and all of those things that I mentioned. So welcome to the show. And I'd like to thank so many countries that have been listening. There's been a real spike in downloads this week that I've just been watching it grow and grow. And that's always really exciting, because if you have a podcast, then you know how you track it and all of those kind of things. I always tell you guys that I don't get too deep into the analytics, but I do look at the analytics just to see the different countries that are responding to it. And there's more, that this podcast is a serial podcast, so you can always start at episode 1 and work your way up. This is episode 37, or sometimes people find it by titles and they go, oh, what's that about? Or maybe you saw the podcast start and you're like, oh, what's this about, on the Apple iTunes store. I think that's a huge source of traffic besides my own website, which is www.letstalkabouthollywood.com. So when I look at the analytics, it just always is so touching and incredible just to see where it's resonating and who's listening. So I want to thank you all right now. So thank you to the United States, thank you Spain, thank you Italy, thank you China, thank you Vietnam, thank you France, thank you Canada, thank you Thailand, thank you Germany, thank you Brazil, thank you India, thank you United Kingdom, thank you Kenya, thank you Finland, thank you Togo, thank you South Africa, thank you, Serbia, and thank you, La Reunion. And wherever else you're listening to this podcast, in transit, in headphones, on your own time, I see you. I see you too. And thanks for seeing me. And thank you all around the world for accepting me and listening to this podcast and becoming a part of this community. I'm so glad you're here. So I wanted to thank everyone for that. It is now May 1st, 2026. It's Friday that I'm recording this. So I'll get right into setting up the episode. We're back to the journals. If you're new to this podcast, again, this is a serial podcast. So it starts in 2001. Each season takes place in a year, over the course of a year. So we're at season 2, and we're in the year 2002. So where I left off with the last episode was me and my then husband, Bebbles, my late husband. We had just moved into our new apartment and had a huge fight. I only took a pause there because there's so much to say about that. But anyway, I was an editorial assistant at The Hollywood Reporter. My supervisor was about to leave on her own. She was relocating, and she was very much beloved there. And so she was the assistant to me and my co-editorial assistant's boss. And my boss had thought that we were going to compete against each other for the job, and then both of us said we didn't want it. So that's what was happening at the Hollywood Reporter. I wasn't quite officially there yet a year. And as for the move into our new apartment, me and Bebbles Stone, my husband, well, when we first, one thing I left out last week was when we moved in, on our moving day, which was Labor Day 2002 in Los Angeles, which was during a heat wave, like 100 degrees on September 3rd, 2002. Yeah, it was super hot, and it was like 125 degrees in the apartment because we were on the top floor. Well, when the movers came, the movers were faster than we could pack up the last minute stuff. So the movers basically put everything, every box, like smack dab right in the middle. It's not like, oh, put those in the bedroom. They were fast. And so when we finally got into the new apartment, it was like someone had fed Gizmo after midnight, like Gremlins. It was just boxes everywhere. And Bebbles was so depressed. And we did all this work trying to get it together and all this kind of stuff. And anyway, I slammed the door. He asked me, was I on crack? Are you on crack? And yeah, he went to a payphone, and he called me, and he was like, I'm leaving you. And I'm leaving the apartment, and I'm going to go live with my sister, because that's what you want. And of course, that's not what I want, and that's not what I said. But anyway, we made up, and that was the last episode. I only laughed because it was just so ridiculous. But that's love in your 30s. So, a new apartment and a 3-year marriage is underway in this episode, which is going back to the journals, September 2002, and this is episode 37, and it's called It'll Get Better, Trust Me. Tuesday, September 3rd, 2002. Fall kicked in with a vengeance in Hollywood. My supervisor's last day at the Hollywood Reporter is in 10 days, so we're predicting a great emotional wellspring. My supervisor was and is cool through it all. I witnessed a shouting match in a film hotspot where one straight executive and a gay executive, both men, had shouting matches that made the gay one seem gayer than usual and the straight guy look more latently gay than usual. It was unprofessional, and the straight one was pushing limits beyond all reason, and no one ended up checking him, so what was the point? I heard a reporter's boss snap at him and tell him to check the fucking Dow Jones website. There's news on there. The reporter that I saw get checked is one of the least conspicuous in town. Another high-ranking writer at the party was brown-nosing and heading for becoming a drunk for life. It was wacky. Back at home, Stone and I are in our own place, and it's so fucking fabulous that it's still sinking in. We are doing well after our Labor Day weekend moving in blowout. I forgot to mention the part of that fight where, in one of the more heated moments, after Stone told me he was leaving me in our new apartment, I grabbed the pillow from under his head, threw it on the carpet, grabbed him by the chin, and told Bebbles, "You're not going anywhere." It wasn't a question or a request. I did this because when his mother put him out of their house when he came out as gay, and he did move out on the spot and they didn't speak for years, I didn't ever want him to have the mistaken impression that I told him to leave, to get out, or to leave our home, because I would never do that. Luckily, tensions were so high at that point, and our rebuttals were so fast, that Stone didn't even know what I said. We called each other mean, and that was probably the most kind of the rubbish that we said to each other that night. When I got home from my news shift Sunday night to take him down to the pool and swim with him on my lap while I swam backwards like a human catamaran, he met me with a kiss at the door and said, "Do me a favor. Don't be so mannish and mean all the time." We started laughing, and I told him he's mannish and mean all the time. We put on our trunks, took virgin drinks to the pool, and swam and played for hours. We came home, had a nightcap, watched British sitcoms, our favorite, Ab Fab, or Absolutely Fabulous, and started planning our budgets and housewarming to come. Stone is all about the housewarming and really wants to have people over. 78% of the potential guest list are his friends, although some are mutual friends of mine by now. We're going for an eclectic guest mix, and my caveat is that there can be no drunken mishaps on the behalf of any guests, so we had to thin the list of people we don't really know. This isn't going to be where people can bring any +1 that we don't know. I told Stone of a dream sequence where I turn off the music and usher out people who were getting on my nerves in a surly fashion. Stone said, "You are off the hook," and made a joke of me having to paint over drunken handprints on the new walls. Actually, my only 2 other caveats are, our bedroom is off limits unless we are talking to guests in private. Also, we'll have alcoholic drinks and non-alcoholic drinks, and anyone who overdoes it on the liquor will not be allowed to drive home. So, the guest list will be people we don't mind hosting overnight. Stone wants to do a soul food throwdown, and I'll do the desserts and baked goods. My sister Ellie complimented me on having less of a sharp tongue, which touched me so. I have had some moments, like telling people, men, to fuck themselves and everything, especially my first 2 years in LA from 1996 to 1998. I think it's something I have consciously worked on. My mom noticed too, around 1999, that I had calmed down some in that regard. It was a conscious choice to not let people get me to the point where I would just say some crazy shit in response. As an actor, there were times that the more trash I talked, the more money I made. I figure I've added my fair share of snaps to the world. Plus, as I got more work in Hollywood, I was more image conscious and didn't want to mess up my gentlemanly ways and manners. I think a lot of that was stifled creativity too, especially in Chicago. I was there for 9 years, a market where I felt I was being stifled creatively all the time. I did a shitload of plays with backstage drama, had harrowing, torturous romances, and all in a cold Midwestern town that was outwardly rowdy and inwardly basic. Wednesday, September 3rd, 2002. I just got a call in the newsroom from a girl who said she flew 15 hours to America just to see Shannen Doherty. She asked me, "Is there any way I can find out where she is or what she's doing? I just want to see her. I flew 7,000 miles to see her." It was sad and also scary that this girl thinks she could just go find her. I talked real talk to the woman that this is not what she should even think of doing based on any stranger she doesn't know, much less celebrities, and much less Shannen Doherty. Shannen, she can rest assured that I did not help her stalker girl. Friday, September 6th, 2002. It's been a busy-ass day, and it's like no one is using logical sense, listening to each other, or wanting to do their job. I'm the one who worked through Labor fucking Day. I'm over this shit. I did get overtime for all my extra shifts, and that meeting that they forgot to pay me for when they called me off my vacation to ask me to do a bake-off with my co-editorial assistant for our departing supervisor's job. I want to sit down and chill out for the first time in a week. I moved and I came to work. Moved and came to work. Not much downtime in between. It really is true about Los Angeles. Nothing happens when it's supposed to, which is all the more reason not to rush. Why rush when it won't make a difference? You rush to the bus and it doesn't come. You plan your weekends around things that fall through. I mean, why do anything on time if that's the case? My boss came over to me today and asked me if I liked my schedule, which is now Monday through Friday and not Sunday through Thursday. I gave him a look. I meant it to be an "are you kidding" look that imparted some humor, because who doesn't like having Sundays off? But it came out wrong, like a cake that fell to the floor. He jokingly said, "Uh-oh, uh-oh." I told him it was just a long week and I was knee-deep in international payroll, my other job. He said, "It will get better. Trust me, it will get better. It will get better." I had a fantasy of an overdue raise in January making it all better. Maybe that's what he meant, but I laughed anyway. He leaned over while I was writing and said, "It'll get better, Carl. There's no turning back. Next Friday will be much better. Trust me." He had this big grin on his face, usually reserved for the executives. It is payday next week. Maybe he has a big surprise. I would think I'd know, but anything can happen in Hollywood. I'm going to have a well-deserved drink when I get home with peaches pie, aka Bebbles, my peaches. Saturday, September 7th, 2002. Today was great. I got to sleep. I haven't had much time to enjoy the apartment until today. It is a beautiful place. The view is gorgeous and it is private and clean. I think it is still sinking in that this is me now. My place. Our place. Tuesday, September 10th, 2002. In the newsroom, everyone has been coming up to me and asking what we're going to do after my supervisor's last day. I have no idea, but I have a sinking feeling that I will surely find out since I've had to cover some of her duties. On a good note, my boss will make a decision this Friday about who his new assistant will be, and then whoever that person is will start in 2 weeks. What if that's the good news? That he'll have made a decision and we all hear who the new assistant is and things get back to normal for my co-editorial assistant and me. Meanwhile, I was told I have to go to an Emmy meeting this Thursday at 11 a.m. I have never been included in the Emmy meetings. It is most likely to handle the credentials for the reporters and other headaches. I'm not being negative, but I see a lot more work coming on and I'm already stacked to the gills. It's going to be interesting around here, that's for sure. I was talking with my sister about dating today. Back when I was dating. Before I met Stone, I had 3 years of dating games, especially when I had blonde hair and the WWE wrestler look. People thought I was like Species or some shit, like I would lure them into a boudoir and become an alien. I think it's fun to go out, but so many bars and clubs are just recycling the same miserable people. Stone and I met in a bar. It can happen. But Stone was also at my apartment every day after that night and didn't leave much to chance. Stone was there and always felt compelled to see me, much to my surprise, even when I was grouchy. When I was in Chicago, I didn't have a date from age 21 to 25. No one called me to ask. It was always either women who wanted to rebel with me or closeted security guards who wanted to lift weights at their house or watch women in the Wisconsin Dells, presumably after we rented a room. That was a hard no. I hold the record for the most consecutive dateless years in your early 20s. The air conditioning is still not working yet. The electrician can't seem to fix one circuit breaker that's off. No lease will be turned in until it's fixed. Otherwise, the apartment is a dream. It's a 1-bedroom, but it's like a palace after the dank negativity of where we moved from. All right, everybody, I'm back. It's the recap for that episode. Thank you for listening. Well, where do we start? And that was really just kind of a slice of life episode. Of course, we'll be right back to the journals next week. I can say that I do remember my boss telling me that things will get better, to trust him. And you'll see what that was all about. That will be coming up. And I do remember that shouting match at the Film Hot spot I told you about. So the straight executive and the gay executive, who were both men, they were so loud and it was so shrill. And so when I said that the gay one seemed gayer than usual and the straight one looked more like latently gay or closeted gay than usual, it was because it was true, and hey, I'm gay, so it's not like I'm hating, but it was just so ostentatious. And so like the gay guy is like, his voice was going up and he's really, really mad. And then, the one who's supposedly straight was just like, yeah. And it just escalated. And I was like, it was like Itchy and Scratchy. You shut up. You shut up. Why don't you both shut up? It was that kind of thing. So anyway, that I remember being just like, wow. And that reporter getting yelled at by his boss, check the fucking website. There's news on there. He didn't deserve that. I just ran into that reporter literally like 2 years ago when I was at Disney Plus. He's at Hulu now. So see, you stay in the business, you start running into each other again. So that reporter, he did fine. And the gay executive who was in that shouting match, he's still working. The latently straight one is not. I ran into him in front of Morton's Steakhouse probably about 7 years ago, and he was not in the business anymore. And he's kind of, based on his Facebook and stuff, he's kind of gone off the deep end. But he's still married, and gorgeous kids, really nice wife. So that's the update on them. But they're not my friends. But they sure made an impression on me. And then what else did I want to talk about? Oh, the sharp tongue. Oh my gosh, when I was talking about my sister and my mom telling me that I was getting better with my temper. Yeah, I never cussed out women. That's why I stressed that it was guys. Plus, even though there was no social media back then, there were still cameras, and there was still word of mouth. And so I didn't ever really worry about that. I just always kind of, once I got to the Hollywood Reporter, like I said, because it was so A-list, I mean, the magazine was like making $50 to $80 million, depending on the year. You were just told by the publisher, hey, you're an ambassador of Hollywood, so everything you do out there, is going to reflect on this magazine. So that wasn't hard to do, especially because it was entertainment news, trade news. And so, of course, you want to be credible with your sources or the people that you're talking to or getting to know, because you're going to be working with them all the time, or seeing them crossing paths. So back then, I would just do like one drink. If I was out and there was like, say, an open bar, or even you buy your own drinks, I would always figure like one drink like every hour. So if you stay there 2 hours, you have 2 drinks, and just make it last. So that way, I never said anything that I regretted. And by then, like I said, I was a gentleman. I grew with the job. But I mean, I had already grown in my career and with my communication with people. It had gotten a lot better and a lot less scrappy and defensive. Plus, I just didn't want to have, to regret things that I said. Because, a lot of things you can get past. But, every now and then, if you've had heated arguments, or, you say something that you didn't want to say, but you were so mad, that takes time to heal those kind of things. And luckily that didn't happen too much. But when it did, I apologized. But you'd have to give it some time. Like, it's been 2 months, but maybe in a week or two they'll be over it. But that hasn't happened in years and years and years. Anyway, about Chicago, when I was saying that it was outwardly rowdy and inwardly basic, no shade to any of you in Chicago. Listen, I lived there for 9 years. I lived on the west side. I lived on the north side. And like I said, I did a lot of plays. I became a man in Chicago because I moved there when I was 18. And I remember that first winter, I still had on like an East Coast like winter coat, which is nothing for Chicago when it's minus 25 with the wind coming off of Lake Michigan, just going through your bones, freezing your face. It was crazy. And Chicago it was a super fun town. But, you know, it was also still the Midwest, and it was very segregated. Yes, it was Chicago. You can Google it. You know, it was the Daily Machine was still going on. It was, you know, there were projects all over the place, which was home to tens of thousands, but just the way that it was set up and their services, it was just, you know, a city of wealth and poverty, all things that we see today. But it was just, it was a trip. But Chicago is a big city. There was always something happening there. I made a lot of great friends, chosen family. And so I'm not dissing Chicago, but I haven't been back since I moved away. I haven't been back to Chicago in 30 years. Not that I wouldn't. Just, you know, it was just a hard time. You know, it was just getting to know yourself, growing up. What are you going to do with your career? You know, those kind of things. It was just a lot of those kind of existential things you go through in your 20s. But I'm glad I did it. And, you know, I'm always cool with Midwestern people. You know, I got used to hearing my name, you know, flattened out, you know, with the Midwestern vowels. When I was a waiter, I think I said this in a different episode. I remember I wasn't fast enough for this table of 8. And my boss was like, "Oh my God, Carl, if you don't move faster, I'm going to blow you out of the water. Oh my God." Or if someone was like, "Who's Carl?" "Oh, you know, he's Black. That Black guy." Like Peanuts, when Snoopy doesn't like something, he goes Black. Blecch. "Who's Carl?" "Oh, he's the Black one." Oh my God. Anyway, and of course that wasn't all the time. I'm not trying to make a parody of Chicago, but Chicago was scrappy. They didn't put on a lot of airs. I'll never forget, I was at this job one time, and there was an intern from France, and her name was Francoise. And I'll never forget, like, this Irish-American redheaded Midwestern supervisor came downstairs, and she was like, "Oh, I've heard you joined our team. That's great. What's your name?" And the intern said, "My name is Francoise." She said, "Okay, Francois. So what you do is you come over here, and then you go." And Francoise looked mortified. But I knew how to say her name, Francoise. I am Francoise. Okay, so, yeah, no shade to Chicago. No shade to Chicago. And look, when I was in Chicago, I remember as an actor, because everyone was like, no one's going to come from LA or New York to film here. And they do. The difference back then was that Chicago, you couldn't book like main roles in Chicago. You know, the main roles and the main characters would be cast in New York or Los Angeles, and then they do the supporting cast in Chicago for realness. But look, Chicago's a world-class city, and the weather is off the charts. Oprah was there, and I remember being on her show a couple of times in the audience, like when I was a teenager in early 20s. So anyway, Chicago there's a lot of great memories from Chicago. You can have a good time in Chicago. So, but it was not a very happy time for me. That's for sure. But anyway, for this episode, I loved, again, in hindsight, because I don't see these journals until I'm getting the script together, which is the actual transcript. I'm not adding anything. It's always nice to remember these nice moments between me and Bebbles, because, you know, Bebbles passed away in 2005. I did not know that, you know, our relationship was on borrowed time, not like that. And so it always makes me happy to remember those things and that I wrote them down. And that it's real, because we still argued and there were still things going on, but I loved him, and he was so incredible and so always behind me in my career. He would always say, you know, you don't know how powerful you are, and you got to just keep going. You know, these people, like, they like you. They like you, sweetie. You better go do that shit. And he was right. And it was also nice remembering when we started dating, because we met at a bar, and he came over to my apartment every single day after that until we moved in together. And that's not why he was doing it. He just said, look, I don't want your career. I don't want to interfere with your friends or your family. I just want your free time. Your free time you have, I want you to spend it with me. And he was there every single day. He never, ever left. And it was just like, it was fine with me. Look, don't threaten me with a good time. Because I always felt, there's so much that we don't know about each other. Even though you talk in couples, or if you're in a relationship, or even a cuddle ship, whatever you're in, you could just, you could never know everything there is to know about a person. And so just getting to know those things is always really, really interesting and fascinating. Especially if you can maintain during those hard times. And we had been through some hard times, and some harder times were to come. And also with Bebbles, he had been put out of his house by his mother, his late mother. I believe he was I think he was in his late teens, early 20s, and he was at home. I'm assuming late teens. He was at home with his mom, and his mom asked him one day on Christmas. He had criticized the Christmas tree because he loved Christmas and he loved these elaborate Christmas trees. And so he just didn't like the artificial tree that his mom had gotten for the house. And so he just criticized the tree. Very innocuous, and she said, well, since we're being honest, are you gay? And he said, yes. And she said, well, then you need to get out of my house right now. And he got out of her house on the spot, and they did not talk for 6 years. And they did come together. They had a very tearful reunion. He saw her in a mall. That's when they reunited. He said, sweetie, there was this lady with this red hair that looked so pitiful. Her hair looked so bad. I was like, someone needs to do her hair. And then he said, and then she turned around, and that was my mom. And they reunited in the mall, then and there. And for the rest of her life, they were close. And he had to, trigger alert, he had to take her off of life support. And I remember he would tell me, sweetie, there's never going to be anything so hard to do. But when someone has a do not resuscitate order and they're on a respirator and they can't breathe on their own and they don't have brain activity, you don't have a choice, but to honor their wishes that they don't be resuscitated. And you're not going to want to do it, but you have to, because they trusted you and you love them. And I remember listening to him and not knowing that just years later, I'd be in the same scenario with him, except he had at least forewarned me. Not that that made it any easier, but we won't jump ahead of that. That's season 5. Okay, so Bebbles is still around in these journals. Thank God. You'll hear more about him. He's awesome, and there's really no Hollywood Reporter or Hollywood story of my career without him. And there's certainly not my life, the first half of my 30s without him. He's just incredible. So rest in peace, baby. I know he can hear this in the bandwidth somewhere. So that's for Bebbles. Anyway, that is this episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Before we wrap things up, This podcast runs on donations. It's always going to be free. There's never going to be a Patreon or special bonus episodes. No shade to those who do that because, every podcast is different. But if you'd like to donate to this podcast, and no amount is too small, and the app that where you can do it, it accepts currency in 86 different currencies in 96 countries. So it's safe. You can donate whatever you like. So there's no amount too small. If you want to donate $5, you can. And the way that you can do it is you can go to www.letstalkabouthollywood.com/support. SUPPORT. That's it. Or you can go into the show notes, meaning wherever you subscribe to this podcast. If you look at the episode details, what the episode is about, there's 2 links there where you can donate. Or you can go to my website, just letstalkabouthollywood.com, and there's a donation box there. If you'd like to, if you're so moved. And if you can't, no worries, come back and I'll see you next week. And thank you to all of the countries I named, to those of you who I see, I know are on this journey with us. Thank you so much. Thanks for making me a part of your podcast routine, whether it's in the day, evening, in transit, when you have a minute, doing dishes. I do the same thing. So thank you. I love you. Have a terrific weekend. Be safe. I know the world is crazy right now, and I have faith, and I just want you to know that I see you. Thanks for being here, and I know we're all doing the best that we can. And so, as always, until next time, don't forget, love is real, and I wish you all great things. Bye for now.